Welcome, everyone. My name's Ingemar Hunnings. Welcome to our webinar this evening, which is on the SQE, the QWE, and exemptions. So I'm going to map out what we're going to cover and some housekeeping rules on this. I am recording this. I gave everyone notice that I would record this. There will be access given to this recording if you ask for it. So if you want to have access to the recording afterwards, please can you message me either in LinkedIn or by email, not in the chat here. Now, you're welcome to ask questions. Please put them in the chat to the group, to everyone, so that people can see what questions are being asked. I'm going to be talking for a short period of time, giving out information, after which there'll be a Q&A. Now, that will be me going through the questions put into the chat one by one, and then doing my best to answer them. Okay. The video in due course will be available on our YouTube channel, and I'm going to share my screen now. Okay. And you can see here that there's a YouTube channel, Hunnings Consultancy. We have lots and lots of videos on here about the SQE and QWE questions that people have asked in these webinars, and then where I've done my best to answer them. There are some other things, videos up there for other services that we offer. There's a lot of compliance support that we give to law firms, but also data protection advice and such like. So what I'm going to cover, I'm going to introduce myself and explain how I got involved in helping people with the SQE, a little bit about what we do. Then I'm going to be talking about what is the SQE. We'll move on to explore qualifying work experience, and then move on to talk about exemptions, after which there's going to be the question and answer session where I'm going to work my way through the questions you put into the chat, hopefully answering them, or at least do my very best to do so. So, as you can see, my name is Ingemar Hunnings. I am a solicitor. I qualified in 1992, obviously long before the SQE was brought in. I spent 24 years in private practice in a solicitor's firm in England. I was an equity partner, that means part owner of the business, for 14 years. I was head of a department of 60 litigators. I sat on the board for the firm. In 2014, I left the business and stopped practicing law and set up my own consultancy, which is Hunnings Consultancy. And we assist businesses in the legal services sector with the business of running their business, which involves a lot of compliance support. We help implement case management systems like Leap, and we work with Proclaim, and we soon will be working with Clio. And I also do a lot of help with the SQE. People wanted to qualify through that. How did I get into that? Well, one of our law firm clients was actually a firm of paralegals, and the owner of that wanted to qualify as a solicitor. So he saw that the SRA was bringing in a new way to qualify, which is the SQE. And they allowed someone to reach outside of their organization to have someone confirm their qualifying work experience. So this sparked me to look into this to see how I could help him. And I worked closely with the SRA then from the summer of 2020, devising what I thought looked like a method for being able to assist someone by confirming their qualifying work experience. The SRA said, yes, that looks about right. And so we have very recently just confirmed the qualifying work experience for our 100th aspiring solicitor. So 100 QWE confirmations, most of which have been overseas, outside the UK. Okay, so that's a little bit of an introduction on why I'm giving this information out, because I've ended up being a little bit of a subject area expert. I've also ended up helping people with navigating their way through applications for exemption from the SQE too. So in that area as well. Now then, what is the SQE? Okay, let's bring that up here. Someone is drawing over my screen. I don't know why you're doing that, but I wish you would stop it. Okay. The SQE is the new, relatively new anyway, method for qualifying as a solicitor of England and Wales. The UK has three jurisdictions, three legal jurisdictions. England and Wales is one jurisdiction. There's Scotland and there's Northern Ireland. So we're talking about England and Wales. and qualifying as a solicitor, which is one branch of the legal profession. There are barristers and other types of lawyers, but we're talking specifically about solicitors who are regulated by the Solicitors Regulation Authority, the SRA. And so the old way of qualifying was called the LPC, Legal Practice Course. In September 2021, the SRA brought in the SQE route. And that's quite different in the sense that the SRA brought back into their control the decision as to whether someone qualified. Whereas under the LPC route, it was up to the decision of the law firm that was training them. And you had these training contracts, which were like gold dust, and you tried to get hold of, and then you could qualify. So under the SQE, there are 4 elements that you need to satisfy. You have to have a degree or degree equivalent. Notice it's not a law degree. So if a training provider says you have to do a converter course, that's their choice. It's not the SRA saying that you have to do that. So the SRA are making it much more accessible for you to become and qualify as a solicitor. B, you have to pass the exams, the SQE1 and the SQE2 exams, which are currently administered by Kaplan. And everyone has to pass the same exam. When it was the LPC, different training providers and universities and such like set them themselves. Here, everyone meets the same standard. You also have to have 2 years full-time equivalent qualifying work experience confirmed to the SRA by an SRA-regulated solicitor. And then finally, you need to go through an identity check, DBS, so that's criminal records check, that sort of thing in there. Okay. So that's the basic steps. Obviously, there are exemptions, which we will talk about in a short while. So validating your degree. Little thing, I'm on our website and you can see the URLs beyond the scribblings that someone's put on my screen. Thank you. But you can see the SRA has information about this. I've just pulled it together to make it easier. And by the way, the links to the resource materials I'm showing you, I will put in a post onto LinkedIn tomorrow. If you're not on LinkedIn, then email me. And those people we would have emailed with the link anyway, for a list of these links, and then we can send it out to you. So validating your degree, I think the SRA normally uses Atlantic Data, this company here, to help with the validation of the degree. And you will do that through your My SRA profile on the SRA website. Okay, ID identification. So I'm just picking up these 2 things that really are nothing to do with us. So identification at the end of it. So this, again, people use Atlantic Data for that. I have recently put a service up here on our website that we can help with this, because a number of people have hunted me down and said, oh, you're a solicitor. Can you do that? You can do it via Zoom, and you would need to put in passport details and other identification into Atlantic Data, and then we can do a Zoom where this is checked through. So that is just at the very end, and it's just one of these things that the SRA needs to do to make sure it is you. The exams. Okay. We've got here an indication of the prices. There are 2 exams, the SQE1 and the SQE2. The SQE1 is a multiple choice exam. It's 180 multiple choice questions in each of the 2 papers for the SQE1, FLK1 and FLK2. FLK stands for Functioning Legal Knowledge. 10 hours of exam time in total. You can see the topics here that are covered. It's tough time-wise. The exams are taken at the Pearson VUE centres in the UK and in certain centres around the world at the Pearson VUE. And yeah, of the people who sit the SQE1, roughly about 55% pass. So it's a tough exam, and they're testing you on your legal knowledge, your knowledge of English and Welsh law. The second exam is the SQE2, which you cannot apply for until you pass the SQE1, or if you've got exemption from the SQE1. The SQE2 is testing you to the level of someone who's newly qualified. Effectively, the SRA is having a look at you and imagining, what would it be like if you were licensed as a solicitor? Would you be safe for the public? And so there are 16 written and oral tests. So there's 4 oral and 12 written tests. Now, the SQE1 you can take in the Pearson View centers around the world. The SQE2, the oral parts, you still have to travel to the UK, and the test centers are currently Cardiff, London, and Manchester. So it's testing in the SQE2, yes, your knowledge, but also they want to see you exercising and exhibiting your skills for being a solicitor. Okay. So they're really having a look at what would you be like in the real life situations. And so, for example, when you're doing the oral per court, the judge will badger you and ask you questions. The client will not cooperate with you. So be ready for that. Of the people who sit the SQE2, roughly about 77% pass. It's a higher percentage, but remember it's self-filtering because you can't sit it until you pass the SQE1. Okay. So that's the exams. I would just point out that there are exam training providers and the SRA has a list of them. What I've done on this page here is I listed those which I'm aware of with a little bit more information about where they've come from. I wouldn't say that the pricing is up to date because I've not been back onto their websites terribly recently, but it gives you a little bit of an indication of who they are and where they come from. So it's just up there purely as an information page for you. So there are various different training providers and the prices will vary widely between them. You're going to need to do your own research and make your own decisions as to which ones you use. Right. So that's the exams. And as I said, I'll come on to exemptions a little bit later. Qualifying work experience. Okay. So this causes quite a lot of questions and there's a lot of misunderstanding about it. This is not a direct substitute for the training contracts under the old LPC route. It's different. The SRA wants everyone, unless they're exempt, to have 2 years minimum qualifying work experience confirmed to the SRA by an SRA regulated solicitor. Full-time equivalent, the SRA does not define that. They leave it up to the judgment of the confirming solicitor. Okay, what is qualifying work experience? It is the provision of legal services. The SRA has made reference to the Legal Services Act, the provision of legal services. So not the provision of administrative services or financial services or marketing services. It's the provision of legal services. They've not gone any further with regard to defining that because they don't want to limit the different ways that legal services can be provided. I've asked them and they refuse to give me guidance. So I have to use my best judgment. And it is the solicitor who's regulated by the SRA who makes the decision as to whether it is qualifying work experience. Now, the aspiring solicitor will go through their MySRA profile to request that the nominated solicitor, i.e. they've agreed with them that they would do the confirmation. They make that request through their MySRA profile for that solicitor to confirm their qualifying work experience. You put in the name of the organization where you got it, the dates of the period of qualifying work experience, how many months it comes to, and then search for the solicitor by their SRA number. So you can't have a barrister or a foreign qualified lawyer who's doing that because they're not regulated by the SRA. So it has to be an SRA regulated solicitor so that the SRA can discipline us if we don't act properly. But the SRA has said that the solicitor should confirm unless there's a good reason not to. They shouldn't be holding the aspiring solicitors to ransom. The SRA has given guidance in the sense that they said that qualifying work experience does not need to be done in a law firm. It does not need to be done in England and Wales. It does not need to be done in English and Welsh law. It could be done in the voluntary sector, as in unpaid. And also you can reach back in time as far as you want for your qualifying work experience. You can also reach out to an external solicitor to do the confirmation. For example, you may be working in-house in a company abroad and there is no SRA regulated solicitor that you can use. And therefore, this allows you still to be able to progress with your career. So That's very helpful. Where you are using external confirming solicitor, the SRA requires an external confirming solicitor, and I do provide this service, as you can see here. So they require me to do more than if you were working in my law firm. I have to confirm to the SRA that I have seen your work. So I have to go through it with you. And I am required also to confirm that I've got feedback from your supervisor. So we have to do more. And that's only fair because it's equivalent effectively to you working in my law firm where I would have seen your work and I would have seen how you behaved and such like. So there's an equivalence there. Right. Okay. So we'll move on from qualifying work experience to exemptions. So if we go back to this slide here, SQE1. You can get exemption from the SQE1 exam if you have passed the LPC. You have to submit proof through your MySRA profile, and I've not heard of anyone not being granted an exemption from the SQE1 exam. Okay, doesn't say they won't do it, but that's where we're at. You can fill in a form, which is like the equivalent means to apply for exemption from SQE1, even though you haven't sat the SQE2. It's very tough. You have to supply a large dossier of evidence to persuade them that you have experience to a good level in many different practice areas, which means that you don't need to demonstrate through an exam that you know the law. So we're covering, and I'm thinking off the top of my head here, criminal law, corporate law, land law, inheritance law, litigation. So it's unlikely that someone's going to have all of that experience, but good luck to you if you want to try and take that route. Now, if you're already qualified in another jurisdiction as a lawyer, you will automatically be exempt from the QWE requirement. Full stop. You are exempt from QWE if you are already qualified as a lawyer in any jurisdiction. Also, you may apply for exemption from the SQE2 exam. Now, whether you meet the requirements for that will vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, but in general, you need to, yes, be qualified. You need to have been granted through your qualifications similar or equivalent practice rights to an English solicitor. And you need to have 2 years legal work experience. That's different from the QWE. It's a different level, different grade, but you need to have 2 years legal work experience to the level of your qualification. Now, there are some people who are in jurisdictions where the SRA has already studied them and decided that you are exempt. They're called agreed exemptions. And so all you need to do then is prove that you're qualified in that jurisdiction. There are very few of them. I think Ukraine is one, Brazil is another, and the SRA has had a look and said, right, if you're qualified in that jurisdiction, we will give you exemption from SQE2. But it seems to be the case that the SRA does want people to sit at least one exam. I have been told by a number of people who obtained exemption from SQE1 because they passed their LPC, who then had that revoked when they applied for exemption from the SQE2. Now, to me, as a qualified solicitor, it makes sense that the SRA wants people to sit at least one exam so they have a look at them and can be assured that they are safe to be solicitors. Now, bear in mind, I am not the SRA. I'm doing my best to interpret what's going on and disseminate that information. So ultimately, if you have questions, ask the SRA. Okay. I can't grant you an exemption. That's only the SRA that can do it, but I can guide and assist as best as I can. Okay. So this page here gives information about the SQE2 exemption. It says for foreign lawyers, that's shorthand, it's for qualified lawyers, okay? And I've set out here guidance and assistance and such like. Okay. You can download the application form there, and it is here. There's the SRA application form. And normally when you're making the application, you're filling in sections 1, 2 to say you have the same practice rights as an English solicitor. Yes, you got the ethics, and you fill in the information about what you're looking for, which will be 4B, filling this in, and application for exemption from the SQE2. You only fill in agreed exemptions if you're one of those few jurisdictions where the SRA has already agreed the exemption. So you pass straight through to get that. Then you don't fill in 5 or 6, which is all the stuff that you would have to fill in if you wanted to try and persuade them you want to get exemption from SQE1 without having passed the LPC. But if you're a foreign qualified lawyer or existing qualified lawyer, then you would move over those 2 and straight to section 7, where you would fill in section 7A, B, or C, depending upon the circumstances. 8 is only for those people who A, don't have the 2 years legal work experience, or B, their qualification doesn't give them the same practice rights as an English or Welsh solicitor. And then you've got to go and provide more evidence to back that up, and good luck to you. We issue a guidance note which just summarizes what the SRA says needs to be in the letter of reference. Okay. And I think that's what I wanted to cover in laying things out. So I've gone through what the SQE is. I've gone through what QWE is, and I've talked through the exemptions. I'll just make one mention about the MCT. The MCT was part of the QLTS scheme. QLTS is finished. It finished when the SQE came in. It used to be the way that foreign lawyers could qualify as English solicitors. There was a transition period where if you passed the MCT, which is part of that exam, then you could use that as exemption against the SQE1 and then go and sit the SQE2. That window is closed. So people who were following the QLTS route now have to go back and start again, through the SQE route. Oh, and there's one other thing that I wanted to cover, which I have just remembered. This is specifically for people living in England and I think Wales as well. I'm going to search this up on our website. Apprenticeships, okay? So for people who are resident in England and I think Wales as well, not Scotland, they'll have their own scheme and say for Northern Ireland, the people who are overseas, this doesn't apply to you. The government levies on companies here the apprenticeship levy, and the scheme has been around for decades. What's new is that people wanted to qualify through the SQE, or as solicitors through the SQE, and for the first time make themselves or made use of the apprenticeship scheme. Because what can happen is the employer can put the aspiring solicitor on as a graduate apprentice so that they only have the remaining 3 or 4 years, not the full 7 to do. And what happens then is they'll go through the SQE training, as I've just been explaining, and qualify. But the employer has to release them for 1 day a week at least to study. The massive benefit to the aspiring solicitor is that a combination of the government and your employer will be paying your tuition fees and your exam fees. So you won't be paying all that money. So massively valuable if you can persuade your employer to do that. Now, I've got information about this up on here. I'm not going to go into the detail of it, but it is something which is revolutionary for people wanting to qualify as solicitors in England and Wales who are, resident here. This can really help you. A lot of people don't know about that. A lot of employers don't know about that, but it's there. It's well worth doing. Okay, I've talked for enough, giving you general information. What I'm going to do now is stop sharing, and I'm going to start looking through the questions that people have put up. And I'm just going to work from the top and work my way down the questions. So I'm hoping that people put the questions in here for everyone to see. And here we go. So First question, in order to obtain an SQE2 exemption, is it necessary to demonstrate practical experience in all 5 practice areas identified in the SRA form, i.e. criminal litigation, civil litigation, property practice, wills and probate and business organization rules and procedures? If so, what form or level of evidence will be required? So I'm just going to paraphrase this. So the question is, for an application for SQE2 exemption, do you need to cover more than one practice area? And the answer simply is no, you don't. The SRA would have tested you anyway in the SQE1 exam, and they recognize that people may be working in-house where they only work in one practice area. So it's quite all right, for example, the letter of reference just to list what you're doing, which may be just as a corporate lawyer or just as an immigration lawyer or what have you. So you don't need to cover off those 5 practice areas listed in the letter of reference or for the SQE2 exemption. You just need to have the period of legal work experience to the level of your qualification, and that's that. Next question. For an SQE2 exemption, is it necessary to obtain a reference from a referee that is qualified in the same jurisdiction? Would a candidate qualified in Hong Kong need an SQE2 reference from a referee also qualified in Hong Kong? Otherwise, is a reference from someone qualified in England and Wales acceptable? Good question. And I will paraphrase that and then explain that a little bit for other people. So this is to do with the letter of reference. Okay, so SQE2 exemption, does the letter of reference have to be written by a lawyer qualified in your jurisdiction? And the answer is no. The letter of reference which accompanies your application does not even need to be written by a lawyer. It needs to be written by your supervisor, and there are certain requirements, like they have to have directly supervised you. And in the letter, they have to, you'll probably draft it for them, but they have to say what the supervision arrangements were, but they don't have to be a lawyer, let alone a lawyer qualified in your jurisdiction. If they're not a lawyer, then you will be submitting their qualifications, say if they are a professional like an accountant, and or you will be in the letter of reference, which you draft for them, explaining why they are appropriate to be supervising your legal work. Now, it might be they're the CEO. There's only you and the CEO, and they know what you're doing. Fine, okay. And the SRA is going to make a value judgment over that, and they may well reach out to the supervisor to ask them some questions. That's why you have to give their details in there. Okay, so that's easier than you thought. Okay. Next question. For an SQE2 exemption, is a reference from an English qualified barrister accepted? So can a barrister provide the reference letter for an SQE2 exemption? Yes, as can any other qualified lawyer or any other one else, so long as they are your supervisor who directly supervised your work. That's the critical bit. Another question. In relation to the SQE2 exemption, does the referee need to be a partner in a law firm? If your referee left the firm, can this person still serve as your referee, even though you and the referee currently do not work in the same firm? There are 2 good questions there, so I'll deal with the first one. So the SQE2 exemption, does the referee need to be a partner in a law firm? The answer is no, they do not need to be a partner in a law firm. They just need to be your supervisor who directly supervised your work. And as I said before, you will, amongst other things, when you draft that letter of reference, you'll be listing in there what the arrangements were for the supervision. For the SQE2 exemption application, can the referee be working in a different company from where they supervised your work? So the answer to that is yes, because what they're saying is that they directly supervised your work. And the fact that they've left and they're working in another organization is immaterial to that. One of the requirements is that the letter of reference is on the referee's headed paper. Now, it might therefore be in that scenario that the headed paper is not the headed paper of the company where you did the legal work. Well, that's fine. I suppose the SRA are looking for something official and they can reach out to the referee to ask questions. No doubt if the referee, is working for a different company from where they oversaw and supervised your work, you're going to explain that in the letter that you draft for them anyway, so it's clear to the SRA. But that scenario happens quite often, and that's not a problem. Okay, will a Silex L6 qualification still show up through the system the SRA uses to verify our qualifications? That's a good question. I'm not an expert on the different levels of qualification within Silex, and I'm not quite sure exactly what the question is there. Actually, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'm going to share my screen for a moment, because there's one thing I didn't show you, that the SRA has a very useful page. You can see the URL at the top, where they have started to list jurisdictions where they've given guidance as to what they require. And so in England and Wales, then you can see that they do list Silex practitioner as being someone they recognize as a qualified lawyer. Whether that's level 4, 5, or 6, I don't know. And you probably need to ask them for clarification on that point. But you can see there are lots of different types of lawyers within the English and Welsh jurisdiction who are not regulated by the SRA. There is talk about the Silex becoming regulated by the SRA, but I don't think it's happened yet. And obviously that's going to change things within Silex. So any of these people here, they can be supervisors. That's absolutely right. But they don't have to be lawyers at all. That's a really useful page for people. Question here, can you get an SQE2 exemption before sitting the SQE1? Very good question. Yes, you can. You can apply for the exemption whenever you want. Okay. One thing to say about applying for an SQE2 exemption, if you've sat the SQE2 exam and failed it, the SRA may not be willing to give you an exemption from the SQE2 because you've demonstrated that you shouldn't be granted an exemption. So you can apply for an exemption from the SQE2 before you sit the SQE1, yes. Okay. Is a fellow legal exec exempted from QWE? And if so, how to apply for the exemption? Thank you. So, two questions here. So, how do you apply for an exemption from QWE? Submit your qualification proof through your MySRA profile, and then the SRA can tell you, and they will then, if you are exempt, you'll see in your MySRA profile a green tick appear next to the QWE. I don't know the answer as to whether a fellow legal is exempted from QWE. Try it, push it through and see, and they'll tell you. And then you know the answer definitively from them. It doesn't cost you anything, I don't believe, to send through your proof of qualification there. Next question. Can you apply for an SQE2 exemption before applying to sit the SQE1, or must you pass the SQE1 before applying for the SQE2 exemption? So this is, can you apply for exemption from the SQE2 before sitting the SQE1? I believe that you can apply before you sit the SQE1. Okay. Next question. As a foreign lawyer, does a foreign lawyer have to do QWE in the UK? Well, if you're a foreign qualified lawyer, you will be exempt from the QWE, so you won't need to do it anywhere. You won't need to have it confirmed anywhere. Okay? So if you're a foreign qualified lawyer, you are automatically exempted from the QWE requirement. Submit through your MySRA profile proof of your qualification, admission certificate, or what have you, something like that. And that should result in you being exempted from the QWE requirement. Can we complete SQE1 and then a few years later, when ready, sit the SQE2? And is there a time limit? So can you sit the SQE2 a few years after sitting the SQE1? Yes, I believe you can. Time limits, I'm not an expert on the time limits. Double check the SRA website on that. I'm not sure that there is a time limit, but there are limits on how many times you can resit. Okay. Next question. Can a foreign qualified lawyer start working with UK-based law firm whilst preparing for the SQE1? Yes, that's a question of immigration law, which I'm not an expert in. So providing you get the appropriate permits under the current immigration law, yes, you can start working for a UK-based law firm whilst you're preparing for the SQE1. Now, it could be that you work at the level of a paralegal. Okay. Now, be careful if you're working as a low-level paralegal and you're seeking to get exemption from SQE2 by doing legal work in the UK, and it's as a low-level paralegal, you may not be able to persuade the SRA to grant you an exemption from the SQE2. But there are many people who are registered foreign lawyers who work in England and Wales in law firms. It's really a question of employment law and immigration law. It's not something that the SRA itself has a particular view. Next question. Does the SRA have any justification for not considering SILEX fellows for an agreed exemption? I'm sorry, I can't answer that. That's a question for the SRA. I really don't know. Next question. What are the resources that can be referred by the foreign lawyers to prepare for SQE1? Well, it's the same question for anyone. What are the resources to be used to prepare for the SQE1 exam? Well, some people self-study, and I imagine, searching on the internet or being in groups in WhatsApp or LinkedIn or what have you, people who sat and passed the SQE1 may sell on their books and material, which they bought perhaps from training providers. I showed earlier a page that we put on our website where I've listed the training providers that I'm aware of with a bit of information about them. So obviously they provide information, and so you can pay for their tuition, which will help you with that. So it's not required that you do go through a training provider, and you can self-study. So there's a couple of ideas and suggestions there. Another question. In addition to the guidance note on the website, is there an example of what successful SQE2 exemption reference should cover and look like? Well, I showed you on our website that I've put up guidance. And, I put a lot of the free information up there, but we get to a certain point where we're going to start charging for that. And so people who do contract with us for us to help, then we give them a simple template for the referees, the letter in support of the application for exemption from SQE2. And we will also review the draft that you put together and guide you with that, and review your application form as well before you submit it. And we just had this week someone messaging us to say, thank you very much, I've got the exemption. So we don't always hear back, and we do help, but yeah, that's what I would say with regard to that. Next question. In your opinion, is it essential for candidates to enroll in a preparatory school such as QLTS, or do you consider that studying the available SQE guidebooks alone would suffice? So to paraphrase that, when you're preparing for the SQE, should you always use a training provider, or can you self-study? And the answer is you can do either, whichever suits you best. I can't really give a definitive opinion on this because that will vary person to person, depending upon their skills, their ability to study, the time and energy they have to study. So it is very much an individual choice for you. But people do pass who self-study. Other people, they will use the training providers. It's very much up to you. Next question. Can you apply for exemptions under the apprenticeship scheme, or must you sit both exams under the apprenticeship scheme? Very good question. So if you're using the apprenticeship scheme, can you apply for exemptions? I don't know the answer, but I suspect that the apprenticeship scheme is going to be for people sitting both exams, because the apprenticeship scheme, which is obviously created by the government, the framework for it, this is the government of the United Kingdom, has a framework which has to be followed. And the SRA has been careful to design the SQE exams to fit that. And if people then are exempted from bits of it, that's great for them qualifying more swiftly as solicitors. But I don't think that then it would fit the apprenticeship scheme, and therefore the exemption from the fees wouldn't apply. So that's my reasoning on that. And I see someone has verified that by saying that's what the University of Law has said as well. So I'm glad that the University of Law agrees with me. Okay. Now then, next question. Do we receive study materials from the place that we pay for tuition and exams? I really don't know, but I would have thought that's a key part of what you pay for. But I presume there's nothing to stop you getting materials from other places as well. But I'm not a training provider, so I can't answer that. That's one to ask your peers. Next question. I am a qualified nurse and a recent graduate in law. I am planning a career change. My question is whether I should qualify as a Silex lawyer or qualify via the SRA. I am exams adverse, so not keen on doing the MCQ exams or otherwise. Please advise. Okay. This is someone asking for guidance on career change. Should they qualify as a Silex lawyer or a solicitor through the SRA? I don't feel very qualified to answer that. I don't know the MCQ exams or what the qualification process is through Silex. So I think you're best reaching out to Silex themselves and getting a good idea of what their exam process is. I've given you the best I can of the exam process here. You can probably get a more in-depth view by going and speaking to some of the SQE training providers, and then you're going to have to make that choice yourself, I'm afraid. I'm sure that both of them require you to demonstrate how appropriate it is for you to be admitted as qualified by passing exams to some degree or other. Sorry. Next question. How long would it take to do SQE1 and SQE2 realistically, studying alongside a full-time job? It's a good question. Not one I feel terribly qualified to answer, because I qualified in 1992 with the Law Society finals in those days. I haven't sat the SQE exams. I feel that you're best asking colleagues and peers who have done that, but it still is going to be a subjective view, because each person's circumstances are going to be different. Again, have a look at the exam material from the training providers. I'm sure they'll give you illustrated pieces that you can have a look at. But alongside a full-time job, and goodness me, if you've got family as well, it's hard. But that's the case for anyone, say if you're a doctor, accountant as well, I would have thought. Next question. If you do the apprenticeship, do you have to sit the exams along with their timescale, or can you sit them when you want, as quickly as you want, if you progress more quickly? So this is to do with qualifying through the SQE, but using the apprenticeship. Can you choose when you sit the exams? And to a degree, yes, you can. I've heard of, I think it was the University of Law in that circumstance, holding people back when they didn't feel that they were ready yet to sit the exam. So I imagine there is a bit of flexibility with this as to when you sit the exams. Obviously, it's only when the SRA have the sittings that you can then sit there. And there is a bit of a mad scramble, because once, for example, all the seats are taken up for the SQE1, the door closes. You can't then say, oh, me too. So there may be bits of that and some flexibility in there. Next is a question which is very specific. Is the state of Palestine considered one of the countries that lawyers are qualified from where they are exempted from QWE? Now, I'm going to leave the screen for a moment just to look up to see if Palestine is listed. It is not on the SRA list of countries I've already considered. So I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that. I recommend that you contact the SRA direct and ask them. Next question. Do we receive study materials from the place where we paid for tuition and exams? I've already answered that. Yes, that's what you pay for. Next question. What evidence do you need to provide to support an application for SQE2 exemption? Okay, so individual based on 2+ years. So an application for SQE2 exemption, what evidence do you need to provide? So I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to pull up here two things actually. First of all, this page on our website. So if you're filling in section 7A, as in the 2 years professional legal work experience was gained as part of your qualification, then you simply need to upload to the SRA profile proof of your qualification and pay the fee, because the qualification proves it all. 7B is where the 2 years professional legal work experience was gained after qualification. So you'll need to submit the form, the fee, a signed letter of reference from your supervisor, proof of admission of your supervisor, and of you. And then 7C is where it's a combination of both. Some of your legal work experience was as a mandatory part of your qualification, and some of it is afterwards. So you would need to do that lot for there. Now then, I also want to just show you briefly the letter of reference has to meet these requirements. Okay. So we've listed that, we pulled it off the SRA website, and I've modified this as the SRA has provided more guidance. Most recently, that. Then just before that, they added in, they wanted the total number of hours worked per week, and that the referee confirms that they have read your application and reviewed any supporting evidence. So they are tightening this up a little bit. I think because they found more people have applied for exemption from SQE2 than they anticipated. Now, that's my view. That's not verified by the SRA. But those points there, that's the best thing I can do answering your question on that. Next question. Can the referee be a person who has supervised you for less than 2 years? This is to do with SQE2 exemption. I think not, because one of the requirements is that they set out the period of time that they supervised you. And if you are asking for the SRA to grant you exemption on the basis, let's say, that you have 2 years legal work experience, and the referee has only supervised you for one of those years, then that's not adequate. But what you may do is then get another letter of reference from the person who supervised you for the other year. And I've often had that where people have got a combination of a number of letters of reference, which I'll then review, make sure they meet the criteria, and they go in with the application for exemption, the fee, etc. And for each of those supervisors, you would need to send in their proof of their admission if they are lawyers. If they're not lawyers, then explain why they were suitable to supervise you. Next question. Can a solicitor train a barrister not registered? I only need 3 months pupillage as requirements from the Bar Standard Board. I was qualified advocate for more than 12 years in South Africa. I really feel that's almost outside of the scope of this webinar. I'm not an expert in the qualification process for a barrister, and I presume a solicitor can train a barrister, but really you need to refer to the Bar Standard as to what's acceptable for the barrister then qualifying. But a solicitor can train a barrister. If the solicitor has knowledge, the barrister doesn't. If you are qualified as an advocate in South Africa, then it would be open for you to apply for an exemption from from the SQE2. And I've explained earlier how and what the criteria might be. Next question. How long from your experience does the SRA take to grant an SQE2 exemption? So I'll paraphrase that. How long does it take the SRA to grant an exemption from the SQE2 exam? The SRA gives itself a target of within 180 days. If the application is well put together and falls nicely and squarely within the criteria, I've heard the SRA could turn it around a lot more quickly than that. I hesitate to quote a period of time because it obviously is going to vary between how many people are on a holiday, all sorts of things like that. Maybe 30 days. But that's a complete figure in the end, yes. But I have heard anecdotally of people having their exemptions granted far more quickly than the 180 days that they list. The next question, how much evidence is required for the SQE2 exemption? I think I've answered that 2 questions ago in great detail, so I'm not going to answer that again here. Next question. I'm working as a paralegal in UK law firm since last 2 months and also qualified lawyer in a foreign jurisdiction. My question is, considering my paralegal job, which started 2 months back, is it going to be a hurdle in seeking exemption from SQE2? So I'll paraphrase that. Would work as a paralegal have a negative impact on an application for an SQE2 exemption? Potentially. It depends whether you're trying to use that to make up the required period of legal work experience. If you've already got 2 years legal work experience, let's say at the level of an Indian lawyer, let's say, and you are using that, then the fact that you subsequently worked as a paralegal in an English law firm is not relevant because you're not presenting that as a piece of evidence to the SRA. Next question. Do qualified lawyers from all countries in the world are exempt from QWE? I'll paraphrase that. Is any qualified lawyer from anywhere exempt from QWE? The answer to that is yes. The SRA have been quite adamant. They said, if you are qualified in your jurisdiction, you are exempt from the QWE requirement. It's open to the SRA to change their mind, but that's what they've told me so far. Full stop. Next question. I hold MBA in international business. I currently work in IT. I want to switch my career to law. What should I do? Right. Okay. So this is about changing your career from IT to law. And let's talk about that then. So you need to make sure that you are clear you want to do that. So it's probably a good idea to get a little bit of experience in an environment where legal services are being delivered so that you're making that change and that commitment to a lot of time and money and effort with open eyes. That's what I would say with that for a start. Then you need to have a look at what type of law do you want to do, and therefore that might guide you in deciding which type of lawyer you want to be and how you're going to go through and qualify. So you might say, look, I love advocacy, so I want in England to be a barrister rather than a solicitor. So you need to make those career decisions with your eyes open. If you are wanting to qualify as a solicitor, then I've already, in the earlier part of this webinar, gone through what's required. But just to bring it up briefly, you already have a degree, I believe. Yes, an MBA. You would need to sit and pass the SQE1 and the SQE2 exams. You would need to have 2 years full-time equivalent qualifying work experience confirmed to the SRA, and then the usual bits of proving your identity and such like. I think that I didn't share my screen, so I'll just share my screen briefly just to bring that up onto screen so you can see that again. Okay. I hope that's some help, but you're really asking me for career advice here, and that's going to go into individual personal circumstances, which I can't do in a public webinar. Next question. Regarding qualifying work experience, I am a magistrate in waiting. Will this voluntary post be considered QWE? Very good question. So, would work as a magistrate qualify as QWE? I'm not actually sure because I don't have detailed knowledge of what a magistrate does. Are you providing legal services? My initial thought is that you're not. You're passing judgment, but the clerk to the justices is providing legal services, in my view, because they're studying the law, they're analyzing it, they're advising the judge, in this case, the magistrate, on the law, so that the judge can then make the right decisions. But that will be my approach to considering it. Obviously, one would need to have a conversation. I'm happy to do so. I always offer a free, no obligation Zoom to people wanting to see whether we might be able to help them with confirming their qualifying work experience. And so I could explore that with you. Next question. For an SQE2 exemption, would a reference from an English solicitor or barrister be looked on more favorably than one from another jurisdiction? So, SQE2 exemption application is a reference from an English solicitor or barrister more favorable? And the answer is no. The SRA is not interested in that. They're just interested in whether the letter of reference meets the requirements. It doesn't carry any more weight if it's from an English solicitor or barrister or from someone from America or Singapore or Dubai or wherever. If the referee is SRA regulated, an SRA regulated solicitor, you don't need to provide proof of their qualification. You can just list their SRA number in the letter of reference, and the SRA can look up their own records. Next question. If you have gained experience from a law firm as well as in-house counsel, do you get 2 reference letters or would one suffice? How do I paraphrase that? Letter of reference for SQE2 exemption. Do you get 2 if you have in-house and also law firm experience? Really, the point to bear in mind there is, what do you need? So if the SRA is saying, let's say you need 18 months post-qualification legal work experience mentioned in the letter of reference, then if the in-house counsel role covers all of that, that would suffice. So you don't need to get 2 letters of reference unless the time period determines that you need to. Next question. I will be involved in sentencing in criminal magistrates court. Oh, I think this is a follow-up question from the one about the magistrate. So would sentencing in a criminal magistrates court be QWE? I suspect not, because I don't see that you're providing legal services and you may struggle to be meeting many of the competencies that the QWE is supposed to be providing you with, bearing in mind that this is all about preparation for being a solicitor. So that's my personal off-the-cuff view. Sorry. Now then, one final question here. Are there annual fees for being a solicitor living abroad? So I believe there are, because you'll still be regulated by the SRA, so you'll still be paying your annual fees to the SRA. Whether they're different for someone being in the UK, I would doubt. I don't know. It's a question for the SRA on that, but I'm pretty certain that there are still fees that you pay as an SRA regulated solicitor if you're living and working abroad, because you're still regulated by the SRA. I think I've got to the end of the questions. So, unless there are any more, may I thank you for your attendance. I'll be posting onto LinkedIn tomorrow the links to the resources that I've shown on screen. If you want me to email them to you directly, then please email me. So then we'll do that. If you want a copy of the recording or access to the recording, again, email me. Don't put them in the chat here. please feel free to reach out to us if you want us to help you with confirming your qualifying work experience as external confirming solicitors, or to help you through the process of making application for SQE2 exemption. Also, please, could you subscribe to the YouTube channel to help us get our numbers up? That would be really, really good. Thank you so much and have a good evening.